This conference will now be recorded.
As we do in all the unauthorized. Oh, come on, Rick. When you gave me that credit card, I went out and bought a new card going to share it with other people. Anyway, AnCan is grateful for our sponsors. We want to thank them for making the recording and distribution of these sessions available. Those sponsors are Bayer, Foundation Medicine, Janssen, Myriad Genetics, Novartis, Telix, and Blue Earth Diagnostics. Thank you for them. And we also appreciate all the donors who might help support AnCan and make a donation after visiting the site, ancan.org. AnCan notes that it does not accept sponsored promotion of drugs, protocols, or devices. These protocols, devices, or items recommended in our discussions are based solely on our peer experience and the clinical evidence that we find available. AnCan cannot and does not provide medical advice. We encourage you to discuss anything you hear in our sessions with your own medical team. And again, I want to mention that we are conducting a survey to better understand how we might serve the people who visit our sessions here and to help build community. If you could take a few minutes, there is a link in the chat box and or chat window. Just click on the link. It'll open up another window, and it'll just take you seconds to go through that. Maybe a little bit longer if you want to think about your answers to the questions, but we would really appreciate that, taking some time to do that. So I'm going to run through the names online here and see if people are wanting or needing time here. Jim Stewart in Reno.
Nope, I don't need any time, thanks.
Okay. Albert from Strick.
Hey, how's it going?
Great.
How's it going? No, I don't need any time. Here, listen.
Okay. Is this your first time, Albert? I'm not sure I recognize your name.
Yes, sir. You and I talked by phone a few days back, about a week ago.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll let you speak as we go through. Stuart, how are you tonight? Are you going to want some time?
Yes, please.
Okay. John?
Yes, please.
Okay. And Stephen in Vancouver?
Yes, please.
Okay. Richard in Silver Spring?
I'm just going to observe this evening. Thank you.
Okay, great. And if you'd like to throw your comments in, we certainly would appreciate that as well. Cosley?
No, sir. No, thank you.
Okay. John? Okay.
If that's me, Mark, no thanks.
Okay, yeah. Boykin?
I'm fine, thank you.
Okay. Paul N., will you need some time tonight?
Yes, it's a quick status update if there's time at the end.
Okay. Michael? Nick, I think you need to mute yourself, please.
You're not making any noise.
Oh, well, someone has some noise in the background and it was showing your logo going, so I'm not sure on that. Michael Deaver, do you need some time?
Oh, thank you.
Did you say no?
No, thank you.
Okay. And we have one person on the phone. Who is that today? Is that Henry?
Yes, it is. How's everyone doing? I'm all set. Thanks anyway.
Okay, great. And Nick, are you going to want some time?
No.
Okay. Steve Pierce.
No time needed, thank you.
Okay, and Tim?
No, no thanks.
Okay. So Albert, we will start off with you in a second. I'm going to want a little bit of time just as an update in that I'm now 4 years out from SBRT and not really having symptoms, although about a month or so ago, I had an episode of some blood in the urine and took vitamin E and Trental, and it cleared up after a week. I have had this again, and my wife noticed some red spots on the floor that I was unaware of when getting up at night to go to the restroom. And saw the urologist again, and they're trying finasteride, and wondered if anybody had any issues after radiation and got on finasteride and saw changes in it. They do note that there is a possibility of gynecomastia with the finasteride. So anybody use that?
I use Avodart
Okay. And have you,
with the little Rimadex. Don't ask me where I get that, but yeah. So I've been on it for 20 years.
okay. Any problems with gynecomastia or other problems with it?
No, actually, it increased my weight training and libido drastically. Pretty good. Other people have the opposite, but I've been.
And that's what they told me. I got a note from the nurse practitioner with an opposite of a smiley face today, and it was the subject of effects on libido.
No,
So,
mine was the total opposite. It was like taking Viagra, which I've never taken.
okay. Okay, so let's move on to Albert. And what I'd like to do, with your permission, is to ask you some questions so that we can get the basic background of your situation, and then get some comments and feedback from other people in the group, if that's all right. Is that okay, Albert?
How's that? Is that coming through now?
Yeah, now it is. Gotcha. Okay, so if you're all right, it works out well for me to go through a questionnaire that I have so that we can get the basic information and find out which ones of us are, our experience is similar situation to you. So how old are you first?
60. Just turned 60 this year in March.
Okay, and where do you live?
Currently, I live in Los Angeles.
Okay, great. And first diagnosed?
That would be about 2 months back.
Okay, and what got you to the doctors to make the diagnosis? If I recall, it was a routine, was it? Routine PSA?
Correct. Yeah, it was routine. It was routine PSA.
How high did it go?
I think it. Oh shoot, I'd have to look it up. I want to say it was 5.4.
Okay, and tell us about the biopsy then.
So the biopsy came back as a 3.4, and we're kind of moving from there. I have a request to regrade it, check with a different group. So that's just got started today. I got a call back from the office that I'm going through that they're starting that. So hopefully in a week or two, I'll get a confirmation. And that also stemmed from an appointment I had with a surgeon out of UCLA that I had before we even talked. And so he's also in the same office as Dr. Kershaw. So they work out of the same group out of UCLA Med. and he didn't like the information associated with that biopsy. He thought it was incomplete. The surgeon did, so he put that in for me, and he also gave me a referral to Dr. Keyshawn for radiology.
Okay, that's great. Where are they sending the path for the second opinion?
They're going to do it in house. They do it themselves. We'll see. He has a team or whatever that he likes to use. It's Dr. Ritter. I don't know whether you're familiar with him out of UCLA.
Yeah, I don't think he's a pathologist, though.
No. He has a team he likes to use that
Oh,
out of UCLA. So I think it's going to be done in UCLA. Like I said, he didn't like the way it was recorded, so he's getting his staff anyway is getting it done again.
Where was the first one done, Red?
Great question.
Um,
It was done through. I want to say it was LabCorp, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So we usually feel that it's best to go outside the institution. And there are two programs that have by far the greatest amount of experience, and they would be Johns Hopkins Pathology Department and a Dr. Ming, M-I-N-G, Zhou, Z-H-O-U. And I think I shared that with you. And they are doing this all day, and it's the only slides they read. And it's not infrequent that they're going to find out a difference. The reason why it's important is at 3-4 and 4-3 and how much 4 there is. That will really play a role in the likelihood that ADT would be advised for you. Most 3-4s are not going to have ADT as part of the treatment. So it'll be important for you to ask what percentage of the biopsy is 4 when it comes back. Let me see here. So you said Dr. Ritter is the urologist, and then Dr. Keyshawn. When do you get to see Dr. Keyshawn?
I just got the referral, so I'm waiting for them to reach out on the referral. It hasn't registered in my app yet. I use my chart. And
Okay.
Ritter's is a surgeon.
Right. Yeah. So one thing that's really important, if you have not yet shared your name on the AnCan website, you can go into the chat window and put your email in there, and you can get update emails on future events, additional sessions like this. And then also it would be helpful because we'll share breakthroughs and new information we learn along the way. Also in the chat window, Rick just pasted the information on getting your second opinion on the pathology biopsy. Thank you for getting your name up there. And I guess you heard about AnCan through me, so that's pretty straightforward. Do you have any questions for the group, or do people in the group have any comments for Albert? No questions, no comments?
Stuart's got a
Stuart,
comment.
go ahead.
Hi, Albert. Did they talk about getting a Decipher test on the biopsy?
They did. That was one thing the surgeon wanted to make sure got done. And I believe he also talked about the other doctor wanting it also. I'm still learning their names here. Yeah, the office wanted it done. He says the office needed
it. Because if you're 3-4, that test could make a difference in terms of recommendation for treatment.
Yeah.
Like he brought up, this is I'm on the learning curve, right? So one nice thing, all the doctors I've talked to said I don't need to rush to make a decision. So I'm trying to absorb as much as I can and learn as much as I can before I decide how to move forward with this.
Remind us how many cores were positive.
My understanding, 10 cores taken, only one was positive.
Okay, so very clearly there's the possibility that based on the percentage of 4 and based on a second opinion on the pathology, you may well be demoted from this or elevated to the active surveillance group and really not have to go treatment right away. But I think in this situation where you may be able to sit and do nothing versus invest the time and risk in treatment, it's very important to make sure that the pathology is spot on. And I think we all agree with Stuart that the Decipher will also be a very important factor in that. Unfortunately, you're in California. If you're outside California, the Artera AI is a artificial intelligence program that will allow you to put all your data in, and it will quantitate the benefit from doing AI. And you get an idea as to how less likely you would be to have a biologic recurrence. Any questions that you have for us, Albert?
No, like I discussed with you last Monday, I don't know enough to be coherent on any questions. I'm on the front end of this, and I'm just getting appointments with different doctors to get ideas on directions and understanding the pathology and what I got going.
Did you guys see that there was a question asking if Albert had gotten an MRI?
Yes, I did. The MRI was the start of the process. The MRI had lesions in a certain quadrant, and that was what triggered the biopsy.
Did you say lesions? Not one lesion, but multiple?
Oh, they had tissue. They had dark tissue, right, or tissue that triggered it. I don't know if there was lesions. Might be the wrong word, but
I wasn't trying to be critical of your word choice. The question was there one lesion or multiple?
There were in one area there were multiple either fibrous areas that could be cancer, may not be cancer, and then the biopsy was done after that.
Gotcha. Well, I'll just reiterate what Mark was saying, which was you really need to make sure you get a good second opinion on your pathology, particularly yours, because you might just be active surveillance.
Do you know what that means, Albert? Active surveillance?
Specifically no, but I'm guessing watching PSA tests and what doing MRI.
Yeah, it means holding off on treatment, such as surgery, radiation, or medications, and watching your condition quite actively over a period of time. It saves the trouble and side effects of treatment, so it has a tremendous benefit. On the other hand, it just leaves you sitting there on the edge of your seat for, a long period of time, probably, getting carefully monitored. And you can see that there's a lot of feeling in the group that you may be offered active surveillance.
One nice thing is that with the active surveillance, My understanding is in putting together from a bunch of different studies, generally we're going to find that 50% are never going to need treatment. And the other 50%, it may be half of those 50% who get treatment. Um, Either they get tired of this waiting and watching and monitoring, and decide to do treatment, or there's progression. And the progression, again, is slow, that you're not going to come in and be on active surveillance and then turn around a year later and have metastatic cancer all over. So you still have the opportunity to treat it and cure it if you do active surveillance, but it's not the thing that you want to sign up for active surveillance and then take 2 or 3 years off and then revisit. But most people are going to do just fine on that. There is a group, and I think it's this Wednesday is the next AnCan active surveillance group. So if you wanted to also get that side of the story, then you might want to look at and attend that group. And we're glad to see you back here when you have more information about, the likelihood that you need treatment, and you've talked to Dr. Keyshawn and see what he has said as well. Rick, do you know who at UCLA is on par with active surveillance and supportive of that?
I don't. I'd have to check with Howard. I'm pretty sure there is one or two. The problem is that once you're with a particular surgeon, it may be difficult to switch. So, if we're sending you to UCLA, it's a lot easier than if you're already there. And I don't know what Ritter's track record is on active surveillance. I can check right now, see if I can find anything out. But I will say to you, Albert, that I really would want to get those slides checked outside of UCLA. Just call Ritter tomorrow and tell him, no, you don't want it. Tell him he can get them checked if he wants in-house, but you want them checked by either Dr. Zhao or Johns Hopkins. He'll understand. You won't be the first person that said that to him.
Okay. Any other comments here?
Yeah, Albert, if you haven't already found it, PCRI.org.
I was going to say the same thing. Keep going, Stuart.
PCRI.org has a large collection of videos on YouTube that are really great in terms of educational. There are ones that are specific to 3-4 that will explain to you unique factors that you would be looking at, and there's ones on surveillance, there's ones on everything you could think of there, and so you can sort of consume them at your own pace, and will help you sort of get a lay of the land.
That was ECRI.org.
P is in Peter. Prostate cancer.
He is in prostate. Prostate Cancer Research Institute, PCRI. And I'll add to PCRI.org is what Stuart was saying. I'll add to what Stuart was saying by simply suggesting to you, there was a conference. In fact, I met Mark at this conference in September of this year, and I think Stuart has viewed that conference online. Is it available for someone to get online and view that conference, Stuart?
Yeah.
So there was a conference in September 6th and 7th, or it might have been 7th and 8th. It was Saturday and Sunday in September of 2024. I would highly recommend you check out that conference, Albert. There was a lot of really good speakers at that conference, and one of them, Dr. Klotz, Dr. Lawrence Klotz, he was speaking on active surveillance and also intermediate cancer. There were others. I forget what the guy from UCSF's last name was, Mark something. I forget his name, last name Mark and Stewart, but he spoke on radiation. There was a bunch of really good speakers there that you could learn a lot from, Albert. So check out that PCRI. And it's not limited to only PCRI online. For example, the guy Keyshawn that Mark has mentioned, and that I think you're going to see, he has some online videos available. So there's a lot of good wealth there, like Stuart was saying.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I will.
Okay, if we have nothing more for Albert, and Albert, you have no more questions, we can move on to next. Okay, Stuart.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, thanks.
Okay, great. Stuart, you're up.
Yeah, this is some questions for my brother. I spoke to him yesterday, and he's having MRI tomorrow. It's a follow-up MRI. He had one about a year and a half ago that was indeterminate, and with his follow-up visit with his urologist, it's time for it to do a follow-up. And my brother's concerned. He really doesn't want to do biopsy, and so I was curious. I can't remember the name of what the tests were, if the MRI is indeterminate again or pointing towards biopsy, what the other tests were that he could do pre-biopsy to indicate the need, to help it indicate the need for it.
Yeah, so there are two that I think are most favorable now with the highest sensitivity and greatest predictive values. And the one with least data, but most sensitive and specific, is a test called EpiSwitch, EPI, the word switch, PSE. EpiSwitch PSE. And again, you can Google this, and there are video lectures about that as well. And the other one is ExoDx, ExoDx. ExoDx is a urine test. The EpiSwitch is a combination of the PSA blood test drawn at the time and 5 epigenetic markers. So they're looking at the status on certain genes, whether they're turned on or they're blocked. And that seems to be quite specific for more aggressive disease. They note between 95 and 97% sensitivity and specificity. So if that test comes back saying, yeah, this is concerning, they may want to push towards the biopsy. If it's low and the MRI is again confusing, then you might not have to do a biopsy. So both these tests are talking about reducing 50 to 60% the number of biopsies that are done. Because even when a biopsy is done, a lot of the times it's either going to be negative or a cancer that doesn't need treatment. And any test that can help prevent those biopsies or avoid those biopsies, I think is going in the right direction.
Great. I will tell him that. The good news is that if he does have to do a biopsy, his doctor does transperineal, so that would got that hurdle covered if he has to go that way.
Fantastic. Is he also in Connecticut?
No, he's in New York.
Okay, great.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
A quick question. I'm pleased to hear that EpiSwitch is commercially available now, but how does an insurance company feel about it, and how much does it cost?
I'm no help on either of those. I think it certainly costs less than doing the biopsy.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they favor one test over another and what information. We see with the Artera that New York and California are resistant to cover the cost of AI or to approve Artera use. It may be the case that in New York, they're a bit more resistant than some of these other tests. So that's something obviously one would need to check into before doing any kind of procedure. Good point. Any other comments?
I have a question. I have a question for Stuart. Stuart, this is really about you and not your brother. How you doing?
I'm doing well. My second and last treatment was 2 weeks ago today, and right now, the little side effects I was feeling have gone away. So right now, I'm feeling pretty good. I did see. I was watching a presentation Dr. Keyshawn had made earlier this year, and he was showing some charts about short-term side effects from radiation, and it looked like 30 days out is the max is when the max side effects could show up. So sort of got my fingers crossed for the next few weeks.
That's for the initial. There can be with radiation later onset treatment, but for the more immediate treatment, this would seem to be the case. And with your lower dose, hopefully, you've avoided later treatment with it. What kind of monitoring or follow-up do you have to do? And do you know if it's just because it's a study that they're doing it, or would they manage it the same if you were just coming in and you had done full bore SBRT right in the beginning?
Well, I think Dr. Negger's standard practice is every 3 months. But as part of the trial, I will have my first blood test in 3 months and a telehealth follow up with him. Then 3 months after that, I have my next blood test and follow up with Dr. McClure. And next November, on the anniversary of the completion of all the treatments, I will have MRI, PET scan, and biopsy, and that's all. That's the trial protocol.
In doing that, because it's more than they might do in standard, does that PET scan and biopsy come out of your pocket, or is it covered by the study?
Covered by either insurance or the study.
Oh, great.
I've had no out of pocket on any of the treatments so far, and my Medicare statement I saw the other day, so far this year, I'm at about $170,000.
A good deal.
Yeah.
We need to keep Medicare going and not let them damage that for us.
Yeah, the only thing I would say on that, Stuart, is that those numbers are really Disneyland, because nobody pays that amount unless you have no insurance and they don't give you a cash discount. So, I mean, it was kind of like, when I went through treatment, and it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, but they were probably receiving a couple of grand for each session, and not 30 or 40,000 or more. So you really can't put any weight on the numbers that you see on the billing. They're all negotiated to well below that, as Dr. Mark knows from his experience working with insurance companies and private payers. And although I doubt you had any Medicare people in your this practice you were in, Mark, I can't imagine you had too many Medicare people.
No, not many Medicare. The oldest we had was someone 55 who came in wanting to be pregnant. But to segue to that just a bit, Netflix has a movie called Joy, and it's about the start of IVF and how the nurse was far more instrumental in getting that procedure off the ground than they let on now. We were lucky enough, Mary and I, to travel to England and meet with Dr. Edwards, who was the one who developed IVF in the beginning. So it was particularly exciting to see that there's finally a movie about those people. I will say there was a guy from Canada who came down to UCLA and ended up having to put a deposit in for $165,000. And he got back, I think, 80,000 after, but it took months and months and finagling and one person saying one thing and another person saying another before he got the refund in hand. So it's not always easy. Any other comments for Stuart? Okay, John, you're up. John S.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. Yeah, I started my MRI Electra treatment today at Sloan. So I had my first treatment today. Went pretty well. And I go back tomorrow for the second and Wednesday for the third. And then I come back 4 days later, December 2nd and 3rd. And finish up. So far, everything went well, but let's see. You got me a little concerned with the blood in the urine, but
well, I mean, it's something that is there. It's not too uncommon and can happen to people without radiation. But I mean, my blood count actually, it's funny because I saw the Dr. Scholes this week, and if my blood count was any higher, I would have had to have phlebotomy to lower the count because it runs high. So losing a little bit is fine. I've had cystoscopy. There's nothing there to worry about. And we'll see if the finasteride doesn't do it. Hyperbaric oxygen on something like that is 95% effective.
Why do they have you on finasteride? Just curious. What would
to
that
shrink the prostate and to help the healing of that inflammation.
Really? Okay. Yeah, the dutasteride works on both receptors in the prostate, so it's a lot more powerful. So finasteride, finasteride has a half-life of 36 hours, and I think Avodart, the half-life is 40 days. Just something.
Yep. The finasteride is blocking conversion of testosterone to dihydrotestosterone, which is the more potent form of testosterone, and the receptors that are responsible for prostate and penis and hair loss are predominantly working off DHT, and muscles and libido tend to be more affected by testosterone. So, I was told that I can preserve the muscle, but libido probably will be gone, and hopefully the prostate will shrink.
Yeah, I was totally the opposite. Libido just went through the roof. I was outlier. The other thing I found today is empty bladder and actually an empty rectum, which I wasn't totally. So now tomorrow they got to give me enema at Sloan. But yeah, it was the treatment was with empty bladder. So I found that I had spoken to Stuart. Thank you, Stuart. He had mentioned that, and that's they don't require any bladder being full or half full or anything.
So they didn't have you drink beforehand either?
No, they wanted it empty.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's because the software on the Electa machine is different than the ViewRay. When I did ViewRay, we were told to come in with a full bladder. And when you start with a full bladder and have to go 40 minutes, that can be rather rough. So that's kind of nice that you can empty before going in.
Yep. And that's it. We'll see how it goes. What can I say? Move forward.
Wish you continued success.
Thank you.
And Stephen in Vancouver, you're up next.
All right. Hello. Yeah. So I think it was about a month ago that I talked with people. So I don't know if I want to review things or just move on to my questions.
Well, if you want to just give us a brief, this is where I am.
Right. So I'm 73. 4 years ago is when a rising PSA led to an MRI followed by a targeted biopsy, which showed 2 areas all on just one side of the gland, the left side only, of having 3 plus 4.
Okay.
And one of those areas seemed to indicate a bit of cribriform and intraductal architecture, which are, of course, maybe not so good. I have been on active surveillance since that time, but the reality is that the one tumor that was initially 7 millimeters has been slowly growing, and my last MRI showed that it was now almost doubled, about 13 millimeters, with 6 millimeters abutting the prostate wall. So I figure it's time to get in gear and do some treatment. And one of the questions that came up a month ago was, did you get a second opinion on your biopsy? And, my oncologist had said, well, it looked like it was well done. So I hadn't bothered, but I just got that done by Dr. Zhu. And that was a whole process, because up in Canada, I just can't go to the pathology. I've got to get an appointment with a doctor here who puts in a recommendation. And then I was in touch with Dr. Zhu in his office, and nobody in his office were replying back to me on how to ship. And even now, I've shipped it, talked to him, and he's given me a report. And I'm asking, and still nobody is from the office is asking me to pay them, and I'm asking, how do I go and pay? And let's ship the specimen back. But anyways, separate from that, and I'm trying to set up a discussion, a phone call with him. But his report and a very brief hello in trying to figure this stuff out, he said, essentially, I agree with your first pathologist. So in other words, there's not too much change. And so that answers that. I did, because I feel like I'm up in Canada here, I don't really have a great doctor that I can talk to. And, there's all very brief conversations with my oncologist. And I feel like in Canada, the medical, they're a bit, the great side is they can give you some treatments for free. The downside is that some of those treatments are limited to the sort of more old-fashioned, tried and true things. In other words, surgery or a couple different forms of radiation. And I've always wondered whether some of the other treatments that I hear about are applicable to me, but they can't really discuss that because they're not really offering it, and it's probably outside of their protocols. So I reached out to Mark Schultz's office, and just about 10 days ago, I had an appointment with his associate, Dr. Lamb. And in a week's time, I'll have a follow-up, shorter consultation with Mark Schultz himself. So I thought my consultation with Dr. Lamb, which was a Zoom call, was excellent. It's kind of what I'd always hoped for up here. He was calm and knowledgeable and moved quickly into addressing my situation, with the understanding that the reason I'm calling him is that I'm looking for treatment options that are less impactful. And so with that in mind, he thought that I was a candidate for some focal treatments. He thought number one would be high dose brachy done as a focal, just on the left side. And they have a doctor down there that he thinks very highly of. Unfortunately, it's a $40,000 expense. He says sometimes they can get by with just one treatment rather than two. I don't know, but they don't know till they do the first treatment, and I don't know how that affects the costs. The other thing that I mentioned to him, and he seemed to think that was quite a consideration in what he recommended, was that I also occasionally suffer from microscopic colitis, which is a form of stomach thing that leads to periods of diarrhea or loose stool. And it sometimes lasts for a while and goes into remission. I don't really do any medication for it, but it hasn't been anything terrible. But he seemed to think that some forms of radiation, like the SBRT, are maybe not so good for that condition. So his first thing was the high dose. His other ones were HIFU or Tulsa done as focal. Now, again, none of these focal treatments would be offered to me here in Canada unless I went to a private clinic. So that's if I don't think I'm not sure if I could even get HIFU start off or Tulsa. What I can be offered here in Canada is low dose brachy, where they put the seeds in, and of course they would do the whole gland. I might be able to get high dose, but that would be on a trial basis where I would go in not knowing if I was getting high dose or low dose, and again it would be the full gland. The focal treatment. I asked him. I said, "Well, listen, is that some people think that's just kicking the can down the street and that it's half-fast?" And he said, "No, I think treatment on one side is better than active surveillance, and it's better than the other extreme. I think it's okay to be half-fast. It's not as half-fast as you think. It makes a lot of sense. You want to balance curing cancer and not ruining your life." He also seemed to think that with my large prostate, which is now 77 cc's, it was initially 55 4 years ago, but it's now large. He seemed to think that, in fact, there's a bit of a contraindication for some of the full brachy treatments, and they might want to do the hormone ADH for 4 months. And he said, the things I'm suggesting would avoid you having to go through this. So in a nutshell, that's where things are at.
So the size of the prostate is too large for low dose seeds. So that would potentially kick you out of that study. My question would be, I have not seen any data that would show that focal treatment is more is going to change the radiologic progression-free survival or overall survival. The only data out of the recent studies is that focal treatment will delay the time to do definitive treatment. So to say that this is going to be safer in the long run, it's not really going to keep people from having to do definitive treatment. It just allows you to postpone that definitive treatment down the road. I'm wondering whether there are any other markers like Decipher that's worth looking at with focal and cribriform pattern. I haven't seen data on this, but it tends to be more aggressive. And down the road, people who've had that initially, regardless of what treatment, tend to potentially have a more difficult road. So I'm just not sure that there's good evidence on focal treatment with cribriform pattern. I'd be real leery about that, and I'd look. I'm going to look at and see if I can find something and get back to you, Stephen, in a future session. But that has me a bit concerned. I don't know. Does anybody else have any experience with focal treatment and cribriform pattern?
Well, thank you. I do have, as I say, in another week, I will be having a shorter consultation with Mark Schultz. So any other questions I'm trying to collect right now so that I could, also address,
So I would certainly ask about that. In Canada, Dr. Klotz, whose name was mentioned earlier, is at Sunnybrook in Toronto.
Yes, I know Dr. Klotz. Yeah.
I mean, have you consulted with him?
Well, I did have a short consultation with him about a year and a half ago when I thought maybe the Tulsa might be something for me. And he said, oh, yes, but this is before my latest MRI, of course, that showed a larger prostate. But at that point, he seemed to think that I was a good candidate for his Tulsa. And he also said that he does HIFU as well.
And that's with knowing that it was cribriform and intraductal.
Yes, he did have my reports.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I would rely on him.
I am really dubious about that if it's cribriform and intraductal. I mean, I would go back to Klotz and say, are you sure with cribriform and intraductal? I mean, first of all, that immediately makes you a 4. So what do you believe your Gleason score is right now?
Oh, a 3 + 4.
Okay. And that was just confirmed by Ming Zhao, is what I hear you say.
Now, I'm waiting to try to set up a consultation with Dr. Zhao, and this is something what I'll ask him. He did send me a very brief report, and it doesn't mention cribriform. His percentages.
You need to confirm whether you have cribriform and intraductal. That's key, because if you have cribriform and intraductal, and if it was me, I would not even be thinking about focal.
Okay. Well, his report that the one main tumor area, he does put down there's atypical intraductal proliferation, but there is no cribriform mentioned in the report.
Well, whether it's cribriform, whether it's intraductal, as he'll explain to you, that's pretty high risk stuff. And if it doesn't change your risk grade, it doesn't take you from being low intermediate to high intermediate. What it does do is it immediately says wherever he sees that, he has to give you a grade 4. So if he's still grading you as a 3+4, it means that he sees more 3 than he sees 4. But the question is, how widespread is that 4? How many cores is it in? And I would ask him whether he thinks you could be a candidate for focal therapy. I personally would not do focal therapy with cribriform or intraductal if it were me. Might do focal therapy if I had 3+3 and needed treating. Probably would avoid it if I had a fair amount of cancer, and I don't know how much cancer you've got and had 3+4, but the cribriform and intraductal is pretty serious. And we've got another guy that Dr. Mark has spoken to and I've spoken to, and he thinks he's changed categories, and he thinks he's going to be dying next week because of the intraductal and the cribriform. I mean, he isn't, and we've told him that a number of times, but it does change your considerations.
Okay. Right. Well, okay. Thank you. Yeah. He does mention that the pattern 4 is 10% of the tumor area where they did three different cores.
You know, which is why you're a 3+4, because there's probably only in that 10% is he seeing the intraductal or the cribriform or both. But that intraductal cribriform for me would if I'm going to get treated, I would want to get treated with I wouldn't go with focal therapy.
Okay.
I think the data on focal therapy alone is iffy in any situation, but I think in this situation, it's rolling the die, and the only one who loses if it's not the right guess is you. So I'd be concerned about other issues, and I'd certainly discuss if you were going to do SBRT, I would want Prostox to look at whether there's a genetic predisposition to long-term bowel side effects, and then also either a gel or balloon spacer, because that may be a benefit. I don't think it's necessary in all cases, but I think if there's an underlying bowel inflammatory condition, then that might be worth considering. Stuart, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Stephen, I have had focal and spent a lot of time researching it. And while I won't even pretend to express an opinion on the cribriform question, I just would like to comment. The size, the prostate size, and your bowel issues are something to be concerned about. That my suggestion is if you decide to pursue information about focal, I would be very careful that you're talking to some of the best focal doctors, and I would be looking for a doctor that uses multiple methods, because, like, for instance, from what I know about HIFU, I'm not sure that that's right for you. But I would like, if I were you and I was talking to a doctor about focal, I would want to talk to one that's familiar with multiple energy sources, so that they would talk about, that they would consider, given your specific situation, which energy source would be the appropriate one, because I think there are certain ones that could do more harm than good. So I would just be really careful on that.
Well, as I say, thank you, Stuart. Here in Canada, my oncologist has been suggesting the low dose brachy all along, and so I'm looking to see if there's any other options that have less impact. And
Well, hold on a minute. Did you say you're who's been recommending the low dose brachy?
My Canadian oncologist.
Okay, but there's something wrong there. Your prostate's way too big for low dose brachy. Nobody will do low dose brachy on you with a 77 cc.
He's probably not spending the time to even look at my last MRI, which shows that. Previous to that, it wasn't quite so large.
How big was it before?
Yeah,
did you say 55?
Yes, initially it was 55.
Okay, so yeah, 55 is sort of pushing the top limit. 55, 60, but they don't like to do it over, anything bigger than that. I had seeds. I had seeds as part of I was not in your category, unfortunately. I was stage 3, but I had seeds as part of my treatment. If you can get seeds, it's a great treatment. But normally they don't want to do seeds in a larger prostate.
Would they? I wonder if they would put me on hormone treatment to shrink it, and what would that be like?
Well, first of all, I don't know whether they could shrink it that much, and I just don't know. But I think it's a bit speculative, and I'm not sure you'd want to do it if you didn't have to do it.
That's right. Then I wonder what my options are for treatment.
Well, your options are SBRT or surgery. Those are probably, or IMRT. I mean, for me, I would do 5 doses of 4 or 5 doses of SBRT. Simple, easy to do.
Okay.
And yes, you're going to deal with some side effects. Surgery probably at 73 is not a very sensible option. If you're going to do radiation, you've got to try and insist on getting SBRT and not go through somewhere between 28 and 40 treatments, depending on how they dose you in IMRT. But you can do it in 5. I mean, this is not brain surgery. This is a simple one, Stephen. I mean, you know, 5 treatments of SBRT.
Dr. Lamb, he was putting that one lower on the list because he thought it might inflame my colitis, but that's, I guess, not the end of the world.
Okay, well, they can do 4 treatments of SBRT too, but if he feels that would inflame your colitis, then you need to go with the IMRT, which is less invasive.
I think it does matter on the machine that you get it on. And Alberta has one of the MRI guided machines with smaller margins. And with that and the SBRT and a gel insertion, I think you would protect the rectum. The other alternative is the CyberKnife S7 is the latest CyberKnife software. And unfortunately, you don't just know the machine. You got to know the specific level of software. Is it the latest update on the software to make sure that you're getting the full benefit from it? But one of the advantages of the CyberKnife is that it's really 360 degrees in each plane in terms of the beam. So as soon as you fall off the tumor, the dose drops dramatically because you're not sending all that energy in through 1 or 2 pathways. With proton, you just have two beams coming in. They talk about the Bragg effect, but the recent trial on that showed no benefit or reduction in side effects by going with proton. So don't be pushed in that direction. But if you can't get an MRI guided machine, I think the CyberKnife would be something that you can do. And I don't know how easy it is to go from one area to another, but Alberta does have the latest equipment
Yeah.
centers.
Thank you, Mark. Quite often when they have the LACE equipment, they use it for studies first. So it's not actually available except for studies. The other question I see in Ontario, they do have NanoKnife privately. Is that similar to? Is that the same as CyberKnife, or is that a different machine?
No, NanoKnife, I think, is the IRE, isn't it?
No. NanoKnife is, I believe, is the same as CyberKnife or SBRT, I think. Well, but Mark, I defer to Mark.
Stuart, you've been through IRE, so you.
Yeah, IRE, one of the systems is NanoKnife. That was the original one, and they were playing off the CyberKnife name. But no, that is IRE.
Okay, thanks. I stand corrected. I'm wrong.
You had your hand up, Stuart?
No, it was about that. Sorry.
Okay. Nick does. I'm sorry.
I was just going to comment briefly on to Stephen about, excuse me, I would not do HIFU if I was you. And I realize that the gentlemen have been suggesting that you should be doing SBRT. But if you do find out that focal treatment is a reasonable thing for you, and you wanted to do one of those, I would be doing the Tulsa-PRO myself, which I am doing as part of this clinical trial, the same one that Stuart was in. I'm doing IRE, the irreversible electroporation. But if you do end up figuring out that you can do focal treatment and you don't do something like the IRE, which is pretty minimally invasive, at least comparatively so, relative being the key word there, I would be doing the Tulsa-PRO because it's more dependable and it's better monitored. And it's got a little better margins than the other stuff, the HIFU particularly, the other stuff that you're looking at. That's all I mean by that. Right. If you can qualify for IRE, you'd have to pay for it probably. But if you could qualify for it, that would probably be the least invasive. Now, I don't want to give you a line of be overly optimistic here. People like Mark and others would say this, and our doctors, the same I have the same doctors that Stuart does. And I've also gone to other doctors for second opinions on getting focal treatment. The bottom line why I'm saying that is they do well in the target field, but there's high percentage of recurrence. So just be aware of that. Now, I don't really, all I mean by the high percentages, they say to me, they told me 30 to 40%, but that's out of the target. The target they do well in. However, out of the target, there's a high percentage of recurrence. So you got to watch out for that. With that stated, though, my own belief, I admit to you it's a belief, but there is some research behind it. If you could get yourself several years down the road, you don't know what else is going to come up that's going to be highly beneficial to you. For example, the heavy ion radiation therapy. If that was available today to us in America, I'd be looking to do that rather than the SBRT. Not trying to be a downer to you there, Mark. But nevertheless, my big point is I do think there's value to doing something like focal treatment that could possibly get you down the road, even if you have to deal with it later. You just don't know what new thing is going to pop up and research has exploded in this field. So I know I'm looking at it optimistically. I have to admit that to you. But I don't agree with the people who have been downplaying the focal treatments.
Well,
that's
I
the end of
wanted,
I mean, I'd respond to that by saying the cribriform and the intraductal moves Stephen to a different to another level.
I
And
was
I
not
wouldn't
involved.
I wouldn't want to be taking the chance with knowing that I had intraductal and cribriform to kick the can down the road.
All I'm saying is, if the doctors tell you that you actually can, doctors, not one doctor, make sure you talk to a bunch. If they still think that you're someone who can do focal therapy and you end up doing it, there'd be value there. That's my reply to Richard.
so I wanted to make one other comment, and I think this is along the line of what Rick is saying, that you had mentioned at first, Stephen, that the lesion was closer to the border or the edge of the prostate now. Am I correct?
Yes.
So that and the cribriform intraductal would push me, again, I'm here as a doctor. If you want to get pregnant, I'll be your doctor. If you want to deal with prostate cancer, it's an educated guess. But if it were me, I would really push for a PET scan before deciding on any treatment, because as this moves close to the edge, I mean, that was what I had. I had MRIs up the wazoo. PET scans weren't available yet. I went to see the person in this country who did more Tulsa-PRO than anybody, who said it was fine. I had a Gleason 4+3, and I postponed being in the PET scan study because of COVID flaring at that time. I didn't want to get on an airplane. When I finally did, it was outside. I had at least 4 people who were very skilled review the MRI and said they didn't see anything, but it was very clear that I had involvement outside the gland. And that's something I think I'd want to know for. And if there's any way to push for that PET scan, I think that would help you make the case. If you're thinking about, focal, I'd certainly want to do, I'd want to do the PET scan before. And it's unfortunate that the Retire study isn't available other than at MSK. I don't know if they would take someone from out of the country. The advantage of that is
No, they don't. They wouldn't.
Because that is using the focal, high energy focal at the lesion that's visible, but giving a dose of radiation, somewhat less, but a dose of radiation to cover the rest of the prostate gland, because microscopic spread and multifocal disease would be the norm in this situation. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. As we all know, we get different opinions. My Canadian oncologist said, why are you bothering with a PET scan? You already know you have to get treatment. She just, you don't have to bother with that. Dr. Lamb, when I asked him about that, he said, well, I really don't think that it's gone beyond the prostate.
And if he's wrong,
and that maybe you don't need, I only want to get you to spend more money on things that we really need. So there's just two opinions of people I've asked.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think I tend to agree with Lamb that with 10% of what they see, the likelihood that it's outside of the prostate right now is slim. I mean, the concern that I would have, which they cannot tell you, is that cribriform and intraductal on a microscopic basis could be anywhere in the prostate. There's no way of them knowing because it's not a big enough lesion for it to see it anywhere. But the fact is you've got intraductal in the prostate. So if you treat a part of the prostate, you still may have that intraductal and cribriform in another part, and that intraductal cribriform is an aggressive form of cancer. Now, if you had a lot of it right now, or a bunch of 4, I definitely say yes, a PSMA. But I don't see the point of a PSMA scan for somebody who's 3+4, even if it's relatively close to the edge. For me, I would tend to say, yeah, I don't think it's going to give you enough security. But my concern is we don't know where that cribriform intraductal has gone. Just because you don't see it on the MRI, or it doesn't show anywhere else where they punched in a needle, doesn't mean it isn't there. This is like micrometastasis. We don't have a way right now to detect micrometastasis, although they are working on that. So I would be conservative. I mean, it's all well and good. The people on this call who favor focal therapy saying this is what they would do, but we've seen too many people in our groups who come back and have to deal with treatment 3 years later. And the failure rate on focal therapy, this is not the RETIRE study. This is just plain old focal therapy, either HIFU or Tulsa-PRO or whatever, cryoablation or whatever you choose, is 50%. And we, it's really high. So you're rolling the dice. But if you want to roll the dice and then you want to deal with it when you come back, you'll have plenty of options to deal with it. But the likelihood is, in my view, from what we've seen, especially with cribriform and intraductal, there's a good chance you're going to be dealing with it if you choose to partially treat your prostate. That's my own view. It's not medical advice. I would not do it if it were me, knowing I had intraductal and cribriform. And hopefully, even if you treat the whole prostate, it could still come back, because again, we don't know where that intraductal cribriform has gone yet.
Right.
So, looking at my friend, my AI friend, it says that the intraductal prostate cancer is a greater risk factor for spread to the seminal vesicles than the cribriform pattern, but they're both aggressive forms of disease, is the way to describe it. So to assume that you can do non-aggressive treatment for aggressive disease, I think you're just taking an unnecessary risk. And unless you actually have ongoing inflammatory disease, that might be something that the radiation therapist would give you feedback on, and would be able to quantitate that or talk to someone with expertise in radiation proctitis. I'd also look at the Prostox test, though, too.
Pardon me?
I would look at the Prostox test.
Okay.
And I don't know, does anybody know if that's available outside US? Prostox is a genetic swab. They send you the kit, you do the swab, and it predicts the risk of late complications from radiation. And some of the people in the study had the gels and some didn't. So I don't know if you can separate that out and do the test and say, oh, if you use the gel, you're going to be okay. I don't know that it's that granular yet. We're looking for a new version of that data coming out this coming summer. Well, anything else for Stephen? And Stephen, do you have any more questions?
No, it's more information to put in
Yeah.
as I refine this, I guess I maybe would, I guess I think, oh, I should have been talking to this group a year ago, and would have given me a bit more of a heads up on things.
You might want to check in with Dr. Nagar or Dr. Keyshawn just for telemedicine. Dr. Lamb and that group, they work with Dr. Chang at UCLA mostly for their brachytherapy.
Right,
And
they mentioned, yeah.
yeah, and he's good. They've had long-term results. Because of the bias to send that, they have more experience sending stuff to Dr. Chang, who does the brachy, than they do with the newer SBRT equipment. So I'm not sure it's a balanced decision in how to go. So you might want to talk to either Nagar or Keyshawn just to get their opinions, even if you don't plan to come down to the States and pay.
Thank you. I'll look into that. Does anybody find that online, or is anybody?
Yeah, just Keyshawn is Kishan and UCLA and prostate, and you'll find it. He'll come up, and Dr. Nagar, Nagar, first name Himanshu, Himanshu Nagar. Both great people, and both do a wonderful job doing telemedicine.
Is he at UCLA too, or?
He's at MSK in New York. And that's who Stuart and Nick have seen.
Okay, thank you. I'll check that out.
Yep. Okay, great. Paul, you're up.
Okay, just a quick status update. I am on schedule to have my 28-day treatment starting next Monday. So quickly, the reason I got there was a year up on active surveillance, progression seen in MRI, tumor increase, and tumors growing. PSA is also climbing as of late. So the reason I went 28 days opposed to SBRT CyberKnife, I wanted to because my tumor is too close to urethra. Therefore, the radiation oncologist I'm seeing said he's not comfortable with giving me a high dose treatment. Reduce the risk. Uh, Even though I do believe what he said is true, I went ahead and got a Prostox test because I had a televisit with Dr. Keyshawn at UCLA, and he ordered one for me, and the result came back does indicate that I'm high risk for long-term urinary and or bowel issues. And on the opposite end, I'm good for the longer IMRT courses. 28-day, of course, much better than 45, but, so it's manageable. And I'm not too far from the facility, so once again, I'll start that Monday, and I'll provide status as things move on down the line.
When you did the Prostox test and the first scan for SBRT was abnormal, did they run the scan for a lower dose test?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, first they sent me the reports that you are high risk for the shorter treatment, and then they did mention that below I am a low dose treatment to be determined, and then a week later they sent me that and they verified that I've low risk for the longer term lesser dose option.
Fantastic. Any other comments for Paul? How long did that test take to get results back on the Prostox when you sent it in?
I think it was a little bit over a week, because because Keyshawn ordered himself, and of course he's probably one of the originator, uh, co-sponsor of that. So he was able to accelerate that, I guess, pretty quickly. So I don't know if you just by yourself go request that. Well, of course, it has to be referred by a doctor. Now, the only other problem would be when I initially talked to my radiation oncologist a year ago, he didn't really know quite what Prostox was, and it was not FDA approved. So therefore, he was not able to, or he didn't want to order that. But of course, I went to Keyshawn, and that was easy. Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay. Tim, when you signed on, I didn't get to you in the beginning to see if you needed any time tonight. Tim?
No, I'm good, Mark.
Okay, that sounds great. We've gotten through our list. Does anybody have any comments or special plans for the holidays that will make the rest of us jealous? Those of us who have to sit down and cook and clean up after the meals and that kind of thing.
I have a quick comment just regarding the Prostox, which is that although I had to show a doctor to receive the information along with me, I was able to order that myself. Secondly, the results came in about 5 to 8 days.
Great.
So it's not really that much about the doctors. I'm not trying to argue with what, but it just that doesn't have to be a doctor ordering it.
And did you have insurance pay for it or any difficulties with
No,
that?
I had to pay for it. I had to pay it was 500 for one. I opted, perhaps foolishly opted to get both. That was 900. But
Okay.
nevertheless, I paid for it.
And by both, you mean the high dose SBRT and then the low dose. If the SBRT is abnormal, they'll run a one to see if you're at high risk for low. It's a different panel of genetics that allows them to look at effects for low dose radiation.
I'm not disagreeing with your comment, Mark. I forget what the other one was. Stuart, do you remember what the second one is? The first one was SBRT, like you said. I thought the second one might be an IMRT, but I'm not positive I'm remembering correctly.
Right, exactly. It's whether 20 is sufficient or even at 28, are you still at high risk? So it's more looking at the effect of radiation. Are you going to have more likely to have side effects with IMRT as well as SBRT? And
right, I took them just to be safe.
Yeah, one of the arguments that I've had in discussing with Dr. Keyshawn was that I think it means that it may also mean that the tumors are going to be more sensitive to the radiation, and that the most important thing is going to be whether the amount of normal tissue that you radiate as you're going through. If you have narrower margins, the benefits from doing that may be less than if you have a full treatment margin around the tumor. You may be radiating more tissue and greater likelihood of having a side effect. Anybody else have comments for tonight? Okay, so I want to remind people again at the top of the chat window, scroll all the way up. If you haven't filled the survey, we'd really appreciate that. That helps us do the job we have and helps us do a better job to make sure that this is valuable for you guys. That's important. And enjoy the holidays. no problem. We've decided here, no politics. My wife has gotten the duct tape for my mouth when her family arrives to keep me out of trouble. Hopefully, I can do that, stay out of trouble. Okay, we'll see you guys. Are we second and fourth again in December, Rick?
Yeah, no, you're all good. I also want to give a big shout out right now to Causley and Boykin. You may not know, and the people who are going to listen to the recording may not know, but they're the gents behind the scenes who make sure that this group gets posted to YouTube and gets posted to our blog. And we now have, I don't know, 100 and something or more people watching, and it goes up every month. And we really, really appreciate the work they do to get this up pretty quickly. So thank you so much for doing that.
And I also want to comment, Stuart and Nick, you're done with this now. You've gotten through it, and now's the easy and boring part of been there, done that. I hope that all of us, as we get through this process, reach out to neighbors and friends, even people you don't know, to share this. As I said earlier, I'm actually reading a play that I have to review, and it opens with the opening scene in this play, and it's one reason why I don't think I'd want to do it. Has his legs spread and is getting brachytherapy, and I just can't imagine doing that in the theater as entertainment. But we need to tell people about this and know that we're not alone in fighting the prostate cancer, and we can all get through it. So thank y'all for being here, and we'll see you in December.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you, guys. Have a good Thanksgiving.
Night, everybody.